Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and get this webinar started. Today we are talking about supporting the unlikely entrepreneur, the why and the how. And today we're joined by our friends over at ELI, the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. So Gary, I will send it over to you to kick off our fun webinar.
Thank you, Erica. I'm really excited to speak with you all today. I am excited to introduce you to my good friends, Juanita and Jeremy Morris, who are doing amazing things with the Ice House program. Here's how I'd like this to go down today. I'm going to spend maybe 15 minutes, kind of give you some background about the Ice House program. And then I'm going to show you what some amazing people at Richland Community College are doing with the program. So, raise your hand, put your questions in the chat. We'd like to make this as interactive as possible. We'll definitely leave time for Q&A at the end. So let's get started. Let's just jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to click the share sound, optimize for video. Let's see if that all works. Can you guys see my screen over there?
We can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, I'm going to rock and roll. So the title here is about community colleges supporting the unlikely entrepreneur, the why and the how. My name is Gary Schoniger. I'm the founder and CEO of the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. We are the world's leading provider of entrepreneurial mindset education, training, and organizational development. And I am beyond excited to introduce you to Dr. Juanita Morris and her husband, Dr. Jeremy Morris, who have picked up our Ice House program and are doing really, really exciting things with it. And I'm going to let them tell you about that. So the big questions I've been trying to answer now for more than 30 years, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say, what is an entrepreneurial mindset? Where does it come from? And most importantly, how can we develop it in ourselves, as well as our children, our students, our workforce, and our communities? And when we think about entrepreneurs, these are people who are resilient and resourceful. They're creative, they're critical thinkers. They're people who can identify and solve problems when the rules aren't clear, the path is not well defined. And as I'm fond of saying, there's unlimited global demand for people who can think like an entrepreneur. It's like you're future-proof, right? So, back to the question. This is the question I've been trying to figure out for a long time. And one of the conclusions that I've come to is that our ability to embrace entrepreneurship is limited by the ways in which we define it. And so many of us hear that word entrepreneur, and it conjures the image of the Silicon Valley venture-backed entrepreneurs, typically younger white males at elite universities who are coming up with some new technology or social media platforms or whatnot that are, awash in venture capital, and off they go. And, I'm not really trying to disparage the venture-backed high growth model of entrepreneurship. We need that. I get it. But my point is that this represents just a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? It's a visibility versus representation issue. So fast forward about 2007, I got hired by the Cisco Entrepreneur Institute in San Jose, California, to do a gap analysis on the entrepreneurship education ecosystem in North America. And what we quickly found was the way that entrepreneurship is being portrayed in the classroom is largely divorced from the reality of what a typical entrepreneur is actually doing. And so I came back to Cisco with this, and they said, well, what are entrepreneurs actually doing? And I said, well, I have some anecdotal evidence, but I don't really have any hard data. And so Cisco gave me the opportunity and the platform to go around the United States and in North America, actually Canada, and interview about 200 what I would call everyday entrepreneurs or unlikely entrepreneurs, people who have no particular advantage in life, yet somehow managed to alter their place in the socioeconomic structure. How are they doing that? And You know, I had a film guy with me. I was flying all over the country, hearing one amazing story after another. But there was one particular story that caught my attention. It was the story that Clifton Talbert in Tulsa, Oklahoma, told me. You know, he said that he was born in the Mississippi Delta to a teenage mom. He was born in the small cotton community, Glen Allen, Mississippi, born to a teenage mom. Didn't, you know, the future was in the fields, as he said to me. You know, that the future for people that looked like me was in the cotton fields. And he explained that he, at the age of 13, he had gone to work for his uncle Cleve, Mormon, who owned the local ice house. And it was his uncle Cleve that taught him how to think like an entrepreneur. And you know, right out of the gate, this story captivated my heart, my head, my imagination. And so about a year later, I convinced Clifton to collaborate. We co-authored a book called Who Owns the Ice House? And the subtitle is 8 Life Lessons from an Unlikely Entrepreneur. And it's really 8 core concepts that were distilled from hundreds of interviews and observations. I would call it sort of like ethnographic research in my observation and analysis of several hundred everyday entrepreneurs. And it's just told through the eyes and through the story of Clifton Talbert and the lessons he learned from his uncle Cleve. Then in 2010, we got some initial funding from the Kauffman Foundation, and we created a curriculum around this book called the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program. That's the quick backstory. Here's how it works, and I'm going to rip through this really, really briefly. It's a really simple framework, and I want to emphasize that. A lot of what we're trying to do here is demystify and democratize entrepreneurship. It's not that complicated. It's just different from the way most of us have been taught to think. So we wanted to expose the learner to these 8 core concepts. We want to immerse them in real-world entrepreneurial experiences. We want to reinforce the concepts with relatable examples. That's a big part of our secret sauce. Stop talking about Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Richard Branson or Henry Ford and Bill Gates. In order to get people to adopt a new behavior, they have to see people who come from similar or worse circumstances succeeding in this domain. Can't overemphasize that enough. And then lastly, we want to encourage personal reflection, encourage the learner to think about their own thinking. That is, recognize the correlation between their deeply held, mostly unconscious beliefs and the ways that those beliefs are contributing to their outcomes. So 8 core concepts. I'm going to rip through these quickly. These are what we observed in hundreds of interviews, right? The foundation is the power to choose. The single most important thing I think that distinguishes the entrepreneur from the non-entrepreneur is they have a compelling goal. They've chosen something to go after. There's something on the horizon they're trying to make happen. The hope circuit is open, in other words. So, and the literature around this is really, really clear that, you know, people who have a compelling goal are able to access unprecedented problem-solving abilities that are not otherwise available to us. There's all kinds of research around the benefits, the psychological benefits of a future positive orientation. We also observe that entrepreneurs tend to look at problems as opportunities. They're looking for problems to solve, right? And if you're not thinking that way, you're going to trip over problems or opportunities every day. We also observe that they're action-oriented. They tend to micro-experiment. They're not spending a lot of time writing business plans and doing in-depth market research. They're trying lots of things on a very small scale. We call this micro-experimentation, which provides a very important feedback loop. In terms of learning, this is known as an error-based learning process, which is the exact opposite of the way we've been taught to learn. We also observed in these entrepreneurs that they have an unusual sense of curiosity. They're constantly learning. The point is, they're not necessarily learning through traditional means. They're learning in more organic ways, what we would call maybe informal and non-formal means. They're learning from audiobooks, from videos, from online courses, from their peer groups, et cetera. They're also learning from their experiments, but they're constantly learning, which I believe is all tied back to the power of choice, right? They learn how to become very resourceful. They invest their discretionary time, thought, effort in advancing their ideas. Whereas the non-entrepreneur tends to spend their discretionary time and resources on recreation or leisure or things like that. The entrepreneurs also become very reliable. They build a brand of reliability, which continues to generate luck and opportunity. We also observe that they tend to surround themselves with other entrepreneurs. And this creates, in sociology, we call this the community of practice, and the knowledge, the implicit knowledge is transferred within this community of practice. And lastly, they seem to have this ability to persist. They have an acute sense of resilience, which is the ability to get back up after they've been knocked down, which we now know comes from an optimistic explanatory style. So those are the 8 core concepts. Then we immerse the student in real world experiences. And we took the business model canvas and reworked it to simplify it, to take some of the complexity out of it, to take some of the businessy language out of it. We divided it into 3 basic phases. There's the problem finding phase. This is about exploration, inquiry, and observation. The second phase is the experimentation and adaptation phase. That's where we start looking for solutions. And then lastly, once we have evidence of a solution, we now go into execution mode, where we begin to advocate for our ideas and implement them. This is the Canvas process. It's a guiding tool to guide the learner through the process. We also reinforce with the key concepts with relatable examples. And there are about 14 different case studies from a pretty wide variety of people who have come from all manner of adversity, disabled veterans, foster kids. Brian Scudamore is in the upper right. He's the guy that started 1-800-GOT-JUNK with $1,000 as an 18-year-old kid. Bottom right, Ted and Serena Moore, father and daughter, started a multi-million-dollar cleaning business with a couple $100 in a spare bedroom. There's just a pretty broad example of people that have started with little or nothing and managed to succeed. And then lastly, we encourage personal reflection. As I said earlier, we encourage the learner to think about their own thinking. And that's the tricky part about a mindset is our mindset are the beliefs and assumptions that we don't know we have, yet they're influencing our behavior in ways of which we're not aware. And as Carl Jung famously said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So that's the last real component. We encourage this personal reflection. That's how the program works. It's been recognized around the world. Kauffman Foundation wrote this about the Ice House program. They were invited to present the Ice House program to a papal council for peace and justice at the Vatican. I was invited to the European Commission in Brussels to present the Ice House. Tom Rue from the Kauffman Foundation also presented the Ice House to the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Now, what I want to do is shift gears now and show you, just give you a quick example. It's a brief overview about the Ice House program. If you want to learn more, there's a ton of stuff on our website about it. We have webinars every month that tell you a little more depth about the program, how it works. We have a facilitator training coming up in April. We do about 4 public facilitator trainings a year. We do private ones, for colleges and universities around the world. I want to draw your attention to what Jeremy and Juanita Morris are doing at Richland Community College with the Ice House. So I'm going to, before I turn it over to Jeremy and Juanita, I want to show you this very brief video. It's about 1.5 minutes. It gives you a quick high-level overview of the impact they're making. Let's see if I can get this video to work.
Is It's a program to me that help you grow, that help you come out of your shell, that help you to think positive when you always think negative.
This class was way more than I could have imagined. I got an understanding of myself. I was shown my purpose. I realized my gift, and I now know that this class was about me and what I have on the inside, how to give that to the world.
He listened to my idea and he helped focus my idea into something that could be a good business idea. He took the time to show me things that I didn't know that you would need in starting up a business that I think is crucial. It was a good process, and still is a good process because it's still ongoing. It's been an awesome experience so far.
To give us so much and for nothing. He didn't ask us for anything except for us to just show up and be open-minded. There's just nothing we feel like we could do to repay you for what you've given us. What you've instilled in us, it will take us so much further. Thank you.
Wow. I get goosebumps every time I watch that video. You guys are something else. So with all of that said, I'm going to turn it over to Doctors Juanita and Jeremy Morris.
You're on mute, Dara.
I was trying to figure out how to unmute myself. Can you hear me and see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Very good. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary. And thank you for the work. The young woman that you just saw speaking, the last one that spoke with her hair up in a bun, her name is Sharday. And Sharday, when she joined our class, she was sweeping the floor at a factory with the goal of starting a business to, I think she wanted to do personal training for women. But her calling was to be of service to others. She is back in the hospital working as a CNA, getting ready to work towards becoming an RN. And so I told Gary when we met last week that if someone had told me that we would be able to change lives with these 8 core concepts in a matter of 5 weeks, I would have told them that that is not true and it is BS.com. But I've seen it and I've experienced it. So Jeremy and I, or JK and I, are so happy to be here to share with you briefly today. And we're going to try to talk about the work a little bit, and we'll be around to answer any questions. So the question is why and how. For us, and I'll give you a high-level overview of our life. In 2016, we walked away from everything that we knew. And we left Mississippi and returned back to Illinois. We had no jobs. No one in my community, I love my community, and they'll be a little sensitive when I say this, but I tell them that no one in my community would hire me. And so we had to figure it out, because when we left, we had 2 children and we had ourselves, and I was ready to come back to my home community. So we came home December 16th, my home of 2016. My husband is from the Delta in Mississippi, and we walked away from everything. 2017, earlier that year, beginning of the year, we attended a luncheon or something that was being hosted by the city to talk about opportunities to contract with the city. And one of those was lawn services. We figured we'd write a proposal, we'd submit it, wrote the proposal, submitted it, and it was accepted, and Nature's Way Lawn Service was born. When we done that, we had our family truck, which was a Tahoe. We had the lawnmower that that we had to mow lawns at our houses. And so we borrowed money from my mother to buy an open trailer and 1 additional lawnmower. So we launched Nature's Way Lawn Service. Our goal was to not have any loans. Our goal was to try to figure it out and bootstrap or do that opportunity discovery, even though I didn't have the language for it at the time. And we also piloted what was called Packet School Supplies. Gary talked about the ideas and how when you are talking about who owns the ice house, it talks about this idea of how do you come up with ideas? And it's not often based on those technical business terms such as market research and those things. It is based on a lot on intuition and what we've been created to do. 2017, we maintained Nature's Way Lawn Service and we launched Packet School Supplies, which is still in business today. And all the while we were adjuncting and we were doing other work to make sure that we could feed our family. 2019, I ran for the local community college school board here in my community, and I lost. But what I learned was that I appreciated the work that the community college in our community was doing to impact and change the lives of others in our community, and I was interested in that. So after I lost that election, I reached out to the president, and by then we're learning how to figure out how to be self-sufficient as entrepreneurs. So this idea of going to work with somebody else gave me hives at that time. I met with the president and said, hey, I love the work that you're doing in our community. If I can be a part or if I can support or volunteer, that's what I would do. Just so happened there was a position available. I kept my consulting company. We also kept our lawn service company, and we kept our school supply company. And I went to work for Richland Community College in 2019 as Director of Institutional Effectiveness. In that year, and I only worked in that position a year, but in that year, I came across a video and a webinar by Gary. I attended the webinar and asked our president, can we become members of NACCE? And he said, absolutely. After I finished making sure the institution was in NACCE and a member in 2021, I pulled the book and I read the book that I saw Gary talk about in the webinar that he had hosted. And I asked my husband, I'm like, why don't, this guy is from the Delta of Mississippi. Why don't you consider doing this certification with me? And because when I read the book, I then made sense. Whether it was the choices we were making or whether we were trying to recognize opportunities and launch business opportunities, whether we were continuously educating ourselves, like we made sense. This is the why for us. When we read the book and we looked at our lives in parallel, that was the first time as a first generation entrepreneur that because everything else and everyone else was telling us that the things that we were doing was not making good, common, and logical sense, but it felt right and we kept doing it. We made sacrifices along the way and we kept doing it, similar to Uncle Cleve and the 8 principles in the book. So we went through facilitator certification, and then we wrote a grant. In Illinois, it's called the Workforce Equity Initiative Grant. And the grant is to serve whatever it is you do, you have to serve 85% minorities and African Americans. We thought that we would slowly start to build an entrepreneurship program inside of the institution. And so that's how the Minority Mentor Protégé program was founded. But for us, the why was because it made sense for us. We recognized ourselves in the work, and we believed that others would also recognize themselves in this work. And so what does innovation look like? And this idea of doing something that is completely non-traditional business startup, non-traditional entrepreneurship, but very traditional in understanding how to build an entrepreneurial life. So for innovation, this is what the ability and the autonomy to look like, to innovate looks like. You will see in the back, the president of Richland Community College, Cristobal Valdez, who kept saying, go for it. Whatever it is you want to do, try it. Whatever it is you want to do, go for it. Sure, it's okay for it to work, and it is also okay for it to not work. Next to Cristobal Valdez, or Dr. Valdez, you'll see the assistant vice president of Enrich, and External Affairs and Relations, Courtney Carson, who this work really is housed underneath him. The Minority Mentor Protégé program, he is over all programming for that particular piece of the college. Same deal, try it. If it's going to add value to the work that we do to change the lives in our community, let's do it. And then you'll see my husband, which is looking like this lady is crazy, but we are going to do it anyway. And then there's me like, hey, let's try different things. But the why for Ice House Entrepreneurship is because we recognized ourselves and we also saw the impact and the difference in our life after we were able to reframe and say, okay, now I have what I need to continue going forward. JK, I'm going to pass it over to you for the launch. So the launch, the concept, there was no pushback from our leadership. It was try the work, do the work. And we started with pilots to start to lay this work out at Richland Community College.
So I cannot agree with my wife more in terms of having the autonomy to process and to initiate the Minority Mentor Protege program on Richland's campus. When we talk about, or when we think about the work that we're able to do and the work that we get to do on a consistent basis, it is an amazing opportunity to actually change the lives of the people around us, helping them to engage and allow them the opportunity to change the trajectory of their lives and the lives of their future generations. So I am ecstatic to have the opportunity to talk about what we were able to accomplish or what we are accomplishing on Richland's campus with the Minority Mentor Protege program, especially taking this Ice House Entrepreneurship curriculum and providing it to people who never would have had the access to it. So we launched in fall of 2021 with our first cohort. We had about 28 people in that first cohort. It whittled itself down to 19 people who came on a consistent basis. So this was a five-week session. Our curriculum was laid out expertly by ELI, and we followed that to the letter. We gave our participants the opportunity to watch the videos, to participate in the reflections, to participate in feedback. We also had speakers to come in to give us their relatable examples of how they've done, how they've worked to establish their own businesses and their nonprofits. So we hosted those on Wednesdays from 6 to 8 p.m. We wanted to make sure that there were no barriers for individuals participating in the workshops and our sessions. So we offered dinner, and we paid for all the materials, the books, the pens, folders, paper, anything that they needed, we provided, making sure that there were no barriers for them. And we had cohort 1, we had hosted in August, and we had another cohort number 2, which was facilitated in October. And at the end of those sessions, we also hosted a pitch competition in December for cohorts 1 and 2, where individuals or our participants were able to pitch their ideas. Now, not everyone decided to pitch. We had about 9 individuals to pitch new businesses, new business concepts, existing businesses, and they were ecstatic about having the opportunity to do so. At the end of the competition, we also provided our participants with a stipend. So for each session that they attended, we made sure that there were funds available for them if they want, and those were cash dollars, right? So though they could use those funds to help start their business. We did not give them any requirements or any parameters in terms of using those funds. They could use those funds for whatever they saw fit to use those funds for. So that launch for Minority Mentor Protege program, the Ice House Entrepreneurship component, has been phenomenal for us, to the point where we, in this spring, we've hosted cohorts 4, 3, and 4. I'm sorry.
Let me do this. No, that's good. Let me do this real quick. You'll see this picture, and that's a group. And in the middle of that picture, there's our one white guy, and our one white guy is Ray Fields. And Ray Fields has, he is the owner of several chains, or probably 5 or 6 stores, maybe 7 or 8 by now, of Papa Murphy's in our community. And what Ray talked about was how he similar worked at a Papa Murphy's for equity in order to build up enough money to invest and buy his own. And so cohorts 1 and 2, we did have guest speakers, and those guest speakers were not only, as Gary mentioned, they were not the folks that we see and idolize oftentimes on television. They were the people that were in our community that our students still have access to, or our participants still have access to today. And I'm going to go ahead and flip the screen because it's where you were going to cohort 2.
Correct. So what we found in our initial sessions, we were spread out, but we wanted to make sure that the community that we were establishing was smaller and could talk to each other much better. Understand that fall 2021, those sessions were in the midst of COVID, so we had to be spread out. So this spring, with the restrictions lessening on COVID and gatherings, we were able to, number one, reduce the class size. So we said that we only wanted a maximum of 10 students or 10 participants in each cohort. So we offered 2 cohorts that ran concurrently, one on Wednesdays, and we took a chance. We gave up our Saturdays for 5 weeks. And we were able to offer cohort 4 on Saturday mornings from 9 to 11 a.m. A smaller room, a more boardroom style, which actually led to more intimate conversations about ideas and how to utilize this Ice House entrepreneurship training program to better their situation, to better their stages in life. We did not invite any guest speakers because we wanted to make sure that we were building a community around these individuals, these participants. And we also served meals, again, in trying to eliminate any barriers that we could for those participants.
Do you want me to chime in, or are you going to go?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
What we're learning, and it's similar to core concept 7 in building community. And what we're learning is that we're asking our participants to think very, very differently. We're asking them to have some different ideas of what it means to be not only an entrepreneur, but even to just be a person. We're asking them to figure out what choices are you making on a day-to-day basis that impact your life going forward. We're asking them to not look for problems and gripe and complain about problems, but look for solutions. What we recognize is that when we put them back in their traditional environments, that their environments is not necessarily supportive of a shift in mindset or thinking. And so for us, what has happened is that we recognize that we have to continue to build and reinforce our Ice House community. And so we have 5-week sessions, and then from 5-week sessions, we offer an additional 4 or 5 workshops. Wednesday nights, 6 to 8, food will be provided with guest speakers. So for example, we offer vision boarding. Part of the reason why we offer vision boarding is to help our participants kind of guide the choices and the decisions that they make and be very, very intentional. That also helps them to be to increase their persistence at what it is they desire to do. We talked about, we have a lean startup or a quick startup. In that session, in that workshop, we want them to recognize that it is not about that business plan, but it is also about clarity around what it is you would like to do. We only invite Ice House alum to these events because this is their community. We have basic bookkeeping and we bring someone in to do that. We talk about marketing and branding and we bring someone in from the community to do that. We also do Ice House alum announcements. And so from there, what you'll find is that two of our participants, one who was recently released from prison, has a lawn service business and snow removal. So when we knew snow was coming, or now that we know that lawn service season is here, we send out an email to our Ice House alum to say, hey, don't forget that this business and this business and this business in your community is able to do this work, and they start to refer one another and they continue to be connected. We've added and we've been intentional about identifying and requesting participation from additional facilitators. So from our first two cohorts in the fall, we asked two specific people, would they consider becoming facilitators for Ice House? And we have facilitator meetings. The four of us, we talk about this, we figure out what's good and how do we make it better. And we've identified one or two from this spring's cohorts. So we're intentional about how are we building this community. My husband, and you can talk more about this, JK, connect them to mentors in their business areas.
So what's important and what's critical for especially the minority mentor protege component of our program is that we find or we take solicitations from individuals within our community who want to assist minority individuals in ownership and operation of their own businesses. So we have partnerships with major corporations in our area. And those individuals have indicated that this is something that pulls at their heart, right? It's something that gives them a feeling of completion with this community by placing our proteges with a mentor from another organization that can steer them in the direction that they need to go in terms of obtaining contracts, providing connections with banking individuals, or people who work in loan departments, connecting them with individuals who have access to contracts within the trucking and hauling industry, providing them with connections with individuals who are in the lawn and landscaping arena, and as well providing them with connections. Just in this picture, that's the president of our community foundation here. So she works in nonprofit. So we have an individual who has decided to start a nonprofit, and now she partners with Natalie to help steer her nonprofit in the right direction. So that partnership is critical when you have individuals who have not necessarily been introduced or have those connections, but giving them the opportunity to make those connections, to provide additional resources and information to our participants is phenomenal. I don't think that, and that's part of this community, right? That's part of this Ice House community. When we say that we want to help individuals become entrepreneurs, change their mindset, and change the trajectory of their lives, we have to put them in positions where they are able to meet and talk with people who have like-minded persuasion. So when we talk about these individuals, we give them people who can help make them or help them be better in whatever industry or business or nonprofit that they choose. Another item that we are building into our Ice House community is a think tank where our alum get together and talk about kind of what they're doing and how they're doing it, and the processes and procedures that they're putting in place to help move their businesses and nonprofits to the next level. So that's going to be our Think Tank Thursdays that will launch here in May and June of this year. And I'll turn it over to Juanita to talk about the personal financial coaching.
Sure. We're finding that we want them to be successful financially. We not only want them to work hard, we not only want them to make sure that to create opportunity and connections internal and external to the Ice House community, but number 5 is using your wealth wisely. And sometimes what we don't recognize is that we just haven't been given the skills and the tips and the tools to do that. And so we're introducing a personal financial coaching through a certified financial coach to some of our clients and some of our participants. And what we're finding is that they're signing up for that. We do everything from a trauma lens. That's the beauty in Enrich and the Minority Mentor Protege program. And we have 4 pillars: mastery, independence, belonging, and generosity. And our Ice House community, really the core of that is understanding how to create a sense of belonging. Whether you've been previously incarcerated or whether you have a PhD, we should be able to coexist with some core fundamental concepts, and we have those 8. We're slowly starting to expand this work. And so this summer, we will include this in a middle school entrepreneurship where they will read Who Owns the Ice House. This summer, we will have a group of young people who are freshmen and sophomores together. And then we will also have a group who are juniors and seniors where this work is being infused into a Business 225 course, so they'll receive dual credit. And so how do we know that we're doing what we're supposed to do? Because our work has come full circle. What you will see is a picture on April 13th of 2017 that my husband said, hey, there's this guy and we know this guy and he's from the Delta. And I was like, yeah, I don't know who he is. And he's like, no, we know him. And so we went up and met with him. And then what you'll also find is our connection with Gary on October 5th, 2021. That is how we know that we are doing what we have been called to do and very intentional. And the beautiful part for me is that I'm not even an employee of Richland any longer. I spent 1 full year, but I serve as a consultant, and the president and the college still creates a space for me to do this work. And I'm going to turn it over, JK, if you have anything else. If not, I'm going to stop screen sharing and turn it back over to Gary and JK.
Good job. Excellent. You know, this work for us is like when Juanita talks about full circle, and she mentioned earlier on that I am from the Mississippi Delta. As a matter of fact, when I talk to my parents about what we're doing and what we're reading and how it's affecting other people's lives, they talk about Clifton because, you know, they know it from a personal aspect. And I vividly remember having definitely Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored, his book in our bookcase, and always wondering, you know, who this person was. But I come to know and come to understand that Clifton was a classmate of one of my aunts. So for me, it's a tremendous opportunity to reflect on something that resonates with me, and just to be able to utilize ELI's tools and what we're doing here with the Minority Mentor Protege program. It is just phenomenal. And I if I never say it, I want to tell you, Gary and your team, I appreciate you. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk about the things that we're doing with Richland Community College, the Enrich program, and the Minority Mentor Protege program on this level. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Man, the world needs to know about what you're doing. That's just such a powerful story. Thank you. I hope there's some questions in the audience here. I mean, we're leaving time for Q&A here at the end, and I think Erica put a chat or in the chat there. If you have any questions, fire away.
Yeah, we're fairly candid and open. And what I'll say is that ELI has been amazing to work with and to work through. And so while we're not we're only telling you that the work we do makes a difference. And the way we're able to do that is by using this platform in entrepreneurship. And so it is, if anyone is considering it, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you consider using ELI and Who Owns the Ice House. Really would.
Awesome. So we've got a question coming in from Clint. How has the last 20 years changed entrepreneurship equity, students, and overall community? So answers from each of you.
It's an interesting question, Clint. I don't really have a historical perspective in terms of equity. You know, I will say this, Clint, the first sentence that Clifton uttered to me when I met him in April of 2008, when I was doing the Cisco work, and he looked off in the middle distance and he said, long before this word entrepreneur became popular, the concept still existed. And I don't know. I mean, that's just a historical perspective, I suppose. But I do think, slowly the world's waking up to the idea that this is not just something for, the academic elite or the venture-backed startup world. That entrepreneurship can empower ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And I'll go one step further and say, I think the world, thanks in part to COVID, is waking up to the idea that not everyone wants to start a business per se, but we're all innately driven to be innovative and entrepreneurial. Those are my comments.
Well, in my response to Clint's question, I think that these last 2 years specifically have given us a different feel for entrepreneurship. I think that when this pandemic is over, you will notice that and this is not research-based, this is probably more opinion-based than anything. But I'm sure that the numbers are out there, or that they will be there. I think that individuals have become more independent in their thinking about how they want to or how they choose to live the rest of their lives. And I think that the only way, or one of the only ways that they're going to do that is to have a lens of entrepreneurship on everything that they put their hands on and everything that they put their minds to. Once they have a mindset that helps them progress with an entrepreneurship lens, I think we'll see a difference in terms of quality of life for people completely, and being able to really do what we're called to do and do what we want to do. So I think maybe the last 20 years, I think there's been definitely some type of revelation about entrepreneurship and individuals working to better their lives. But I definitely feel that these last 2 years will be a call to individuals to really change their mindset and their lives for the better.
Incredible, thank you. So, question from Jared in the chat. He is a new coordinator of an entrepreneurship program at a community college. What are the first steps to implementing this as the core of the program, and how did you guys get started maybe?
I'm not a good one to ask because I don't follow too many rules. So I'll let Jeremy try to answer that, because I need you to stay working, Gary.
Well,
Jared.
I'll just jump in here and say the first step is to become certified, to complete the Icehouse certification program. Our next public cohort is in April. I'm not sure the date, early April. There are 4 live sessions, but it expands over a month. And the live sessions are generally in the evening or afternoon, depending on where you are in the US. But that's the first step is you have to complete our facilitator training.
I agree with Gary on that. I think that the facilitator training was a phenomenal component for us. I think I had been hired on by Richland prior to the facilitator training. But it gives you an opportunity to look at different types of curriculums, the different levels. There's a 5-week, there's an 8-week, there's a 13-week, and then deciding kind of how you want the program to develop within your own community college, within your own entrepreneurship program. Then determining, what works best or what you feel would work best. The first thing to do is to just try it. Definitely take the Who Owns the Ice House book. Make sure it's something that you read or listen to and do like me. I listen to it and read it at the same time. And then look at the curriculum. Take the facilitator training, look at the curriculum, and make sure it aligns. And I don't see why or how it would not. Make sure it aligns with what your program is specifically designed to do.
Make sure that you consider whether your program is academic or workforce, because that makes the difference in implementation. We have a little more, we tried it first in that workforce, so it was our community, and now we're slowly transitioning it into academic for credit work, and it just looks a little different. But the syllabi are there, if you go through the training, and all of the necessary tools are there. But we deliver this very, very differently for those who, like I said, are either working or they are in workforce training or they are previously incarcerated, in terms of how we deliver it for students who are in class.
Can you expand a little bit on that, Juanita? The question from John is, how did the program integrate into existing college curriculum? And then did students receive college credit for participating?
And so the first, in the fall, we done this outside of the academic side. In the spring, JK taught a Business 225 class, and he began to integrate this curriculum as Ice House has it inside of the college curriculum inside of the class. Now this summer, we will also do a similar thing with high school students based on the high school curriculum, and it will be a credit-bearing class. The other option when you're thinking about the community colleges is that it can be a seminar class. And ELI has it all laid out, even in terms of days and weeks and what is supposed to be covered. And so that gave us such a huge boost, but a seminar class can be about anything. This really is about shifting mindset and understanding and moving your life according to those 8 principles. So it is perfect for academic. You just got to kind of work with the traditional academicians who think that business is marketing and business is, a design. But we had to demonstrate mastery outside of that area, and now we're able to move it inside of that area. And it's not an easy thing, but some of us just don't follow rules.
Right.
What's so great about this curriculum and the people who have developed it and provide us the support is that it's easily integratable. I'd say easily. I just tried it this spring. It's easily integratable into, for me, a small business development course. So I took a 5-week curriculum program and installed it into an online component for this small business development course. And if you want to talk more about it, then I'm happy to share kind of what I've done and what my experience has been. But it is purely taking that cassette and making sure that we had the partnership with ELI to provide the information for our students, to provide that component for our students. So it's been, for me as an adjunct instructor, a phenomenal component of this small business development course. So they do a phenomenal job of allowing us to kind of manipulate the tools to provide for our students.
Yeah, I'll just echo what JK just said, that's how we envisioned it, as a framework for the facilitator to make your own, to adapt it to fit your constituency. It's not necessarily, I suppose you could use it as a plug and play if you wanted to, but our hope was to do what Juanita and JK have done, which is kind of adapt it and kind of fit it to their constituents, make it their own and make it work for them. That's exactly what we want to hear.
Incredible. Go
So,
ahead.
yeah, so just, in closing thoughts here, I'm listening to what you guys are saying, Juanita and Jeremy, that it occurred to me that this is about the mindset. That's what this is about, mindset. And it occurred to me that the greatest obstacle to growth is either the belief that opportunities don't exist or that one is not capable. And the Ice House program is designed to like change that aspect of our mindset. We arrive at those beliefs, let's call them assumptions because they're not really conscious. Somehow we wind up thinking I am who I am and the world is the way it is and there's nothing I can do about it. But that belief never comes to our conscious mind. And by showing these folks in the program the example of other people who have come from all manner of adversity and showing how they're overcoming the adversity by being entrepreneurial, it's a game changer. It really is. And once that mind shift happens and what Martin Seligman calls the hope circuit opens, our jobs not only become much easier, but they become exponentially more rewarding and satisfying, I would say.
Perfect.
Juanita and Jeremy, do you have any closing remarks as well?
I think that we get to do some amazing work at Richland, and I have an amazing partner that I get to work with on a day-to-day basis.
Well, thank you, Jeremy.
Are you gifted teachers married? Yes, we are. So it's been a phenomenal ride, and I think it's just going to get better with time. And that's both the marriage and the relationship with Richland.
You and Gary are killing me.
You guys are amazing. Thank you. Thanks everyone for watching. I really, really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes. Thank you so much to all three of you, Gary, Juanita, and Jeremy, for sharing your story, for sharing the impact of the work that you are doing. So this webinar was recorded. It is available afterwards. We'll upload it and send it out to all the registration participants, as well as include any of those links to that next cohort for certification. And then it's available through NACCE, to NACCE members through the NACCE website, as well as through ELI. So NACCE members are community colleges that are focused on igniting entrepreneurship. And so if you are not a NACCE member or you're not quite sure if your college is a member, head over to NACCE.com. You can check that out there. And I do just want to encourage everyone to check out our upcoming events, Makeshift, which is happening next month. That is for maker spaces and makers. We are so excited about that, happening in San Diego, California, and virtually online. And then later this year, we'll celebrate 20 years of NACCE at our annual conference. Thank you to everyone who has joined, Gary, Juanita, and Jeremy. This webinar is now complete.